Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, with the PTR wrapping up, it's about time now that we had some talks about one of the more interesting questions every time something like this happens, which is what builds are looking to really pop off in the upcoming season, of course with the caveat that all this for each class is based, of course, off of the PTR and the numbers that we had there. All of this is subject to change, some of it definitely more than others, and I will try to make note when I think something is quite possibly in danger of a tweak, but for the most part today is going to be essentially the best builds for each class ranked against each other from the testing in the PTR. In 5th place we have Necromancer, whose best build in Season 6 is looking very likely to be, you may not like this, but Bone Spirit once again. Not much has changed here, really. The build has of course received some adjustments, with the skill tree being reworked and with paragon boards being changed how they function, but the functional combo of 100% crit Bone Spirit with ridiculous max essence is still the main core of this, and while it is great at single target damage, there are two reasons that I think it deserves this slot even so. The first is that last season showed very quickly the limitations of this build for something like the Infernal Hordes, which was the main activity, and so unless whatever the new main best efficient farm activity happens to work towards Bone Spirit's strength, it's going to struggle just the same way at farming it. The other reason is that Bone Spirit just sort of isn't really that enjoyable to play, and I know we're judging power, but this is a thing that matters. It's a lot of juggling buffs and making sure that you have everything built up for that one big moment of burst, and while that can be enjoyable for some, and it seems that you can hit numbers that high on Necromancer, it's just a lot of work, a lot of effort to achieve that, and for most people playing the game, they won't want to put in that kind of effort. They won't want to be staring at their buff bar that intently, and for that achievement to not even work all that great when it comes to larger room clearing or just general mob clearing, it just feels a bit underwhelming for something that only really is specialized in bosses. Sever builds, though, are also looking like they have some chance this season, but Bone Spirit is still the top of the pile of corpses. In 4th then we have Druid, and from everything I've seen, the sort of storm slide concept with just massive amounts of landslides, with Nature's Fury triggering Lightning Storm and all the combos that went along with that, is still the best of the Druid builds, the one that was at the top in Season 5. It's still kicking some serious butt, and runewords have just made it even better on the PTR. But I do also want to shout out something new that I've seen being cooked up by Ace of Spades at Goblin Inc., which is essentially a flesh render shout-focused build where your main damage comes from just mashing debilitating roar, comboing that with Grisly Rage, and the fact that you can make Petrify happen from runewords, which essentially lets you have 2 Druid ultimates at the same time. And it honestly is doing quite silly damage compared to what I would expect. I don't think it is quite as strong as a perfectly optimized Storm Slide, but it is still surprisingly a powerful contender. Then in 3rd place we have Barbarian with the AFK Earthquake build setup. This is just hilarious. It uses the new Paragon board for Barbarian with the Force of Nature legendary node, which makes your Earthquakes each spawn a Dust Devil on a short timer. Combine that with all the buffs to Dust Devils that you can stack, the Earthquake legendary that boosts your damage while standing in Earthquakes, and the new runeword that summons Earthquakes for a low offering cost, and then you can stack that with the Rune of Ritual that makes you gain offering for standing still, which is the full AFK version of the build. You can use the rune that triggers when you move to just let you spawn the Earthquakes as you run, no matter how you build around them. Honestly, if you do this combo of the rune word that spawns Earthquakes and the Paragon board with this legendary node and then just build the right aspects and gear around it, it is one of the most unbelievably simple ways of playing that I have ever seen. And we're talking about Barbarian, who not only has Whirlwind as one of its playstyles, honestly one of its best playstyles, and will probably be one of the best ones this season too, and that's straight up spin to win. It doesn't really get simpler than that, but also Barbarian has Thorns builds, which generally have been quite strong recently too, and this season is literally giving a new key passive to Barbarian, which is also built around Thorns, and Thorns are literally meant to just kill things as they hit you, yet this Earthquake and Dust Devils is the proper AFK setup, and that's honestly pretty wild. As for why this is in 3rd for me despite all of this, it's quite simply because 1, while it can clear the hardest stuff in the game, it just does it slower than the next 2 builds and classes, even if it does it maybe a bit more comfortably, and 2, because I think this is quite likely to be nerfed or adjusted in some way before it hits live servers, just because the frequency that you can get Earthquakes through the runewords really sort of breaks the concept of the new Paragon node for Barbarian. They don't really work together functionally. It feels like they were designed by 2 separate people and not really thought about how they interact. So while this entry is, I think, pretty correct right now for where this would sit among the classes, it's also very subject to being moved around a bit before the patch actually hits live servers as a result of this. 2nd place then we have Rogue with the Dance of Knives Victimize build. And Dariel's Barrage is still unbelievably strong right now on the PTR, but the real best tool that Rogue seems to have to apply damage now is the Victimize Victimize key passive. This key passive was absolutely busted in Season 4, which made Heartstreaker builds come up at the top of the crop. It was literally just non-functional in Season 5, which made it just unused even in Heartseeker builds that existed. They just didn't use Victimize anymore. And in Season 6, at least in the PTR, Victimize is back to being absolutely ridiculous. But now in Season 6, the Victimize proc does not scale depending on the skill that casts it, meaning that your only goal is achieving massive lucky hit chance in attack speed, and the rest of your setup is just maximizing both that and the damage of the Victimize proc itself. In Season 4, Victimize did scale with your actual skills, which is why Heartseeker with loads of basic skill boosters was the best combination, because it scaled with the actual hit that procced it. But now, with this change, it's actually currently looking like Dance of Knives, with not even any extra skill points involved, is essentially just infinitely castable while moving because of its own innate enhancement, and you can poison imbue this skill too, which if you didn't know, actually makes any Victimize procs from an imbued Dance of Knives count as being poison damage, so they actually get increased by all of our different rogue poison boosters too. On a functional level, this actually works quite a bit like Endariel's Barrage as a build, where all of your actual damage is coming from a lucky hit proc rather than a specific skill. So you put everything into your attack speed, your lucky hit, and anything that boosts specifically the proc damage. This can use the new Heir of Perdition mythic unique helmet as well, which boosts all of your damage by a 60% multiplier, which is sort of nuts, and this specifically does affect Victimize damage, unlike the things like the actual skill rank gain from the Harlequin Crest. And other than that, it's basically just stack your multipliers and spin to win with what is functionally the rogue's version of a whirlwind build, which is honestly just great. This one has had some talk about whether it will or not be changed by live. I don't think it's quite outrageous enough to be a definite thing to be nerfed, but right now, Victimize is scaling pretty ridiculously with the tempering options that we have and the occasional greater affixes. So to put it simply, if Victimize goes untouched, this will be the best rogue build, pretty much. If it gets nerfed, we are back to probably some version of an Endariel's Visage build in Season 6. Then up in first, we have Sorcerer with, you probably guessed it, Lightning Spear, or I guess more accurately, Splintering Energy, because the Lightning Spears themselves aren't really what do the damage in this at all. This is generally quite similar to Lightning Spear last season as a build, except that because of how runewords are functioning on the PTR, Frozen Orb has a much more active part in this setup than it would have otherwise before. Not that it didn't use Frozen Orb at all, don't get me wrong, but specifically because of the new Tam rune of Ritual. This gives you offering when you cast a non-channeled core skill, which is Frozen Orb. And on the PTR, this is functioning with the bonus Frozen Orbs that are spawned by Lightning Spears through the Fractured Winterglass unique. This gives you offering every time one is procced by this effect, and of course you cause just a ton of Frozen Orbs to happen while using this unique. This is causing Lightning Spear to go even more nuclear as a build than it was on live servers by a significant amount, honestly. And this is to say that if we are ranking nothing but power and considering nothing but the PTR, this build is absolutely nuts, and it's hard to imagine anything would ever be able to top it in the current balance of the PTR. But, and this is a very big but, that rune logically should not work with the Fractured Winterglass bonus Frozen Orbs. It just shouldn't. The terminology and tooltips across the game is very important and generally very unified. And the word cast, when used in any other situation, means when you press the button on your bar. It doesn't mean when the skill happens, when the skill triggers. It means when you actively press the button manually to make the skill cast. This is what is considered casting, and that term is used to prevent you from thinking that it would trigger from the sort of bonus procs from secondary effects like Fractured Winterglass. And so it is incredibly likely that this will be fixed and changed, and that this was actually a bug and not how it's intended to work. However, don't take that to mean that it will ruin Lightning Spear, that Lightning Spear will be a dead build. No, because even without this interaction, Lightning Spear will probably still be at the very top of the list for Sorcerer, and probably still at the top of the list for the entire game. It'll just be slightly less top than it is with this interaction in the PTR. That said, it could be outdone by things that we aren't even able to test on the PTR, like let's say maybe the Spiritborn. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Just a sort of roundup of the best builds for each class and the order that I'd rank them between each other from our time on the PTR. Some of these are relatively new builds popping up, which is actually just really cool to see whenever it happens. Others are just sort of old things with a bit of variation. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy to see all of this, honestly. And all of this is to say, every one of these builds will almost definitely be outclassed in some way by something, or maybe even multiple things, done by the Spiritborn, because the Spiritborn will be a new class, and if the devs have to choose between erring on the side of making it maybe a touch too weak or maybe a touch too strong, they will always lean towards strong for something new. Simple as that, especially for something locked behind the expansion, so I would be very surprised if this isn't the case in the end. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and of course let me know your own thoughts on all of this down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweets. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.